So let me tell you a bit about Isha Merchant, and she will tell us more. I'm going to read out from the little bio that she has on her website because it's super cute. So it says that Isha Merchant lives in Bangalore with her family, which includes two furry members. And Isha has told us that they are downstairs so that they don't disturb us. But yes, we are more than happy to see them, Isha, in case they run upstairs. When not participating in the real world, you'll find her tucked away in the corner with a book and sometimes a pen. That's Isha for you. She is occasionally dragged into reality to play a game of tennis, enjoy a Kathak class, or normal school problems before floating back into the fascinating world of books. She loves history and historical fiction, seeing them as a medium to revisit lost times. That's fantastic, Isha. And we hope you, not just this book, we hope you write many more. So, over to you. Tell us about your book. Tell us what made you write it. And we'll request everyone to be on mute while Isha is talking to us. And if you have any questions for her, please put them in the chat box. Once her presentation is done, we will take up those questions from the chat box. So thank you all for joining in. Over to you, Isha. Go ahead.
So hello everyone, good evening, and thank you for joining. I'll just start. Yes. Okay. So I as Reshmi ma'am kindly introduced me. I'm Isha, and I have written the book The Swing. I'm currently 15 years old, studying in the 10th grade in Bangalore. And I do enjoy many hobbies like tennis and Kathak, but writing and reading are my favorites. This book, The Swing, is my first novel, and it is a historical fiction based on a true story. It is set in the background of the communal riots in 1947 while crossing the newly formed borders from Pakistan into India. So I'll just give you a little bit more information about my book. Yes, so my book, um, the protagonist of this book, Padma Bajaj, and her family, they find themselves on the eve of independence in 1947, having to migrate from their home in the newly formed Pakistan, then known as Sindh, to India. And this was very abrupt. Until then, there was no notion that they would actually have to leave their house. Uh, until then, they imagined that the partition may not happen and they could stay at home. But as communal riots became even more violent, they knew they had to leave. And that has led to their migration and subsequently the passing down of this story through many generations and finally to myself. So this story, incidentally, is true. Padma Bajaj was a real woman and my great grandmother, and she was she was the inspiration behind this book. I don't think I would have written this book if not for her character and the kind of woman that she was then. To feel inspired by a person without having actually met her. So this book started in seventh grade from a school project, and I never knew it would develop into this back then. It was just a small article that I was putting into a coffee table ebook for my school for the Amrit Mahotsav occasion. But as I kept collecting information on paper, just little bit of snips here and there, the stories that my family would tell me about my great grandmother, Padma Bajaj, I started feeling more fascinated. And that led to a little more research into the partition of 1947. So, my first rough draft, and it was very rough, it was on paper. I started writing this imagining that it was my great grandmother addressing my mother and her siblings in a very sweet bedtime story introduction. So she tells her grandchildren about her entire life story. And perhaps maybe I would have liked to be told this by her this way as well. Somebody once asked me why I wrote this book, and I found that a very interesting question. Because apart from being really fascinated with history and the partition, it was also the fact that I always called myself a Sindhi in school as well, but before writing this book, I had very little idea about what it was to be a Sindhi, who I was in terms of my cultural background, and this book opened a whole new world for me, not just into partition, but into the realm of Sindhi culture, which we have lost quite a bit after partition. Um, as I have mentioned, since the book is real, uh, since the book is based on a true story, I still call it a historical fiction because I have not heard this account from Padma Bajaj herself. I have heard it from my family, my aunts, my grandmother, my nanny, and my mother, and that's how I actually was able to piece the story together. And I've also introduced events in the book that are inspired from true historical events that I have researched. So it is a historical fiction. Hopefully, the percentage of fiction is not as much, but yes, definitely. Like I said, my sources for this book was not Padma Bajaj herself. In fact, it was my family. For the beginning part, especially when I was researching back in seventh grade for the project, my sources were my aunt and later on my grandmother. And without them, I truly wouldn't have been able to put this book together because there is so much out there. Um, I wasn't, I got very lucky with this book as I had a storyline to depend upon, a true storyline, and I didn't have to try to figure out what happened next. But then came the problem about trying to figure out whether these events, whether these stories that were passed on were true, whether they were fitting in with this chronology, the time that it was in. And for that, I depended a lot on books and online archives. In fact, a lot of what I researched from books and online archives did not make it into the book. I finally I believe I've read quite a few interesting books. In fact, Narendra Singh had written a book called The Shadow of the Great Game, which is on India's partition, and it is very well written. And it gave me a sense of what the world was like at the time, not just India, but how India was interacting with different parts of the world, and perhaps also what influenced the partition in the first place. It made it easier for me to understand why it was happening and why there was so much terror at that time. Also, archives such as the 1947 Partition Archive, created by Gunita Singh, was a godsend for a person like me who hasn't actually lived through the experience. These are all, almost all of them are first-hand accounts of partition survivors as they talk about what it was like to move either from India to Pakistan or vice versa. So, being a historical fiction, being a historical fiction, my book did have many challenges to it, and one main challenge I would say was in the chronology of events. In the chronological order, since I was piecing together many stories and many bits and pieces, I found it quite hard at times to not make an error. I found myself on many occasions being corrected by my mother and my grandmother about their attire or how they used to talk back then, or their simple customs that we don't have in today's today day-to-day life. And I think chronology was definitely a big challenge for me when it came to this book. Also, another challenge for me, I would say, was definitely the part about Sindhi culture. I um, I had to depend a lot on what my mother would say about Sindhis, and I don't know much. But I would really like to thank my nanny for this. I don't know how it is possible that she remembers so much about what my great grandmother said, or how she remembers all these stories and all these amazing references about Sindhis that I've been studying a little more avidly right now. But uh, it is definitely, one of my it's a challenge, but it was a challenge that I was able to overcome with the help of my nanny. Um, when it comes to my favorites, and I can talk on and on about this, I would definitely address the historical part and the research. The research that went into this book, Um, it partly came from my own interests in history and the stories that I read online. But a large part of it is the stories that I used to hear as a child. The and in fact, the naming of this book, The Swing, it is not only a metaphor for the life that my great grandparents had to leave behind in Pakistan, which I will be coming to in a minute. But also, it was the first story I ever heard about my great grandparents from my mother. And it was one that has stuck with me all these years. And it was a slightly more sentimental reason for naming the book The Swing, or Pinghu, as it is called in Sindhi, uh, because this was the first time I heard about my great grandparents. Uh, so Um, another favorite of mine when it came to the book was all the real life stories that I was reading from the partition archive. In fact, the level of detail that we are missing in today's textbooks is more than compensated when hearing and listening to these anecdotes. Um, so give a little bit I'll give a little bit of background on the storyline of my book, The Swing. So Padma Bajaj and her family, which is consisting of Tiomal Bajaj, her husband, and their children, uh, Padma Bajaj marries when she's quite young, only 13 years old, and this quite dashes her hopes of becoming a teacher, which she had been dreaming for a long time. And being a very progressive woman, a really smart woman, it came as a huge disappointment, but she quickly realized that she couldn't spend her whole life thinking about what she could have been. Uh, and this is where her friendship with my great grandfather, her husband, Tiomal Bajaj, came in. He was an enterprising man, and he basically built his life up from scratch. He lived with his elder brother, Pesamal Bajaj, and his wife, referred to as Amma in the story. And while they were at the bottom of the hierarchy in the household, Padma Bajaj and Tiomal Bajaj, they slowly overcome the odds, and Tiomal Bajaj rises from a simple worker in the factory to attaining a really important status in there. He starts earning more, and finally, the financial situations of the family improves slowly, and so does their family grow. And Padma Bajaj starts also promoting education with her family. When her children are born, she knows that she's not going to just educate the boy, but she's going to make sure every single one of her children, every single person in her family is going to be educated. Because as she said, Shiksha insan jo triyo netar hundo aahe, or education is the third eye of man. She, just as they start establishing their life in Rori in Pakistan, present day Pakistan, they hear about the partition. First, they do not believe it, and quite obviously so. Their life is only finally improving in the few years before partition. They are able to afford the education of their children. They are able to move into a flat which they are able to rent. They are able to afford small luxuries that they weren't being able to afford before. So the news of the partition came as a shock. But um, because they refused to believe it, they wanted to make their home. And as Padma Bajaj had wanted for a long time, she wanted to adorn their home with something that is known as quite a necessity in Sindhi households, and that is the pingho. It's just it is a large swing. Of course, it can't reach too high, but it is a nice place for all the children and all the family, the whole family to just sit and relax. It's something you would find in the courtyard. They finally are able to buy one in 1947 itself, and as Bhabhi, as they used to call Padma Bajaj, Bhabhi, she described it as the most beautiful pingu. It was carved, it was ornate, wooden, and it had slivers of mirror embedded in the surface that would glint every time light would touch it. It was a beautiful masterpiece. And more importantly, the pingu was theirs. They could finally afford it. It was a luxury. But with the coming of the partition, they had to leave the pingu behind. They had to leave their whole life behind. Um, Hence, the pingu is a metaphor for the life they left behind and the life they would make now when they came into India. So, talking about Sindhi culture, uh, in fact, before writing this book, I did not know much about Sindhis, and um, in the last few months, I have been put a lot in touch with my Sindhi background through my mom, through my nani. I hope now I will be able to learn about the Sindhi language. But while in this book, there are some instances where I mention about a few Sindhi customs, very slight, just the attire or what they used to eat at home. And that again, I would really like to thank my Nani for that. She has been one of the biggest supports in my book. And without her, I don't think, firstly, the book would be possible, and second, I would not have been so aware about what the Sindhi culture was like without my Nani. Um, I think that's it. I'll stop.
Thank you so much, Isha. That was quite a fascinating presentation and makes us all very curious to know about your book. In fact, I'm reading out a comment that's come. Well depicted. This is from Kejal Shah. Well depicted story by a young girl. Enjoyed reading every chapter. One can actually visualize the scenario and feel their emotions. So while we, ask Isha a few questions, I would encourage all of you, if you have any questions, any encouragement for her, anything, kindly put it in the chat box and we'll read them out to her. Isha, the first thing, how does it feel to be a published author?
To be honest, it's an amazing feeling. my mom, especially, she'll tell all our friends and all the patients that I have written a book. And because the story is so close to her also, it feels really good knowing that Bhabhi's story is with everybody right now.
Right. Very true.
So
It's so yes, there. So Yogesh Talreja has asked, next a book on Sindhi customs and traditions, maybe. Would you be interested in writing something like that?
maybe I would need so much research for that, but I'm up to the task. It is actually very fascinating.
You know,
I
uh,
would love to do that.
that's great. And we wish you a lot of luck and success if you take that up. When you were doing the presentation, there was something I was thinking. You were right. We don't really, the amount of information you would have got from the partition, 1947 partition archives, we don't really read much about partition in our history books. In the school textbooks, it's just a short couple of short paras. So when you started research on this, did you really have an idea, even if you had heard about Padma Bajaj and how they moved from your family, before you started research, did you really have an idea of the intensity of it? What a huge thing it was? Did it surprise
Uh,
you?
I think it was a very vague idea. You would have these statistics that millions lost their lives in the migration. So you would know that the communal rights were really bad, but to hear statistics and to actually hear these people who have lived through these experiences, it's quite a different thing altogether.
Right, no?
And
The stories are more impactful than the statistics.
yes.
And they. So, as you were telling her story and you were talking to your aunt, your nanny, your mom, and as you were, so was there any experience that they described of Padma Bajaj's, the entire, her life or when she moved, anything that has stood out for you? And for whatever reason, was there something, would you like to share, an instance that you have depicted in the book that really has stayed with you?
Um,
It could be anything. It could be, doesn't have to be an instance. It could be something that she may have said or done, anything.
This is something I don't think I have not included in the book actually. But on the nights when I would have writer's block and I wouldn't be able to progress further from a chapter because I wouldn't know how to go on, mom used to step in and she used to tell me all these stories to try to motivate me. She told me this one story once about my aunt
Mm-hmm.
and how Bhavi had encouraged my aunt to take up a computer class, and she said that computers are going to take you so far. Study computers, it's going to help you a lot. She was always a very progressive person, a very smart person. And I think this is one of the things that has really stuck with me that Bhavi was a go getter. She would not take no for an answer. And she was headstrong, but and willful, but she is one of the most um, inspiring people I've ever heard about.
Absolutely. And what a foresight, right? On
Yeah.
computers. Yeah, that's amazing. Before I go ahead with any questions, I can see some in the chat box. Did any movies on partition provide you any input for the book? Dhruva has asked.
Uh, I don't think any movies particularly. I think I'm still yet to research that. It would be very interesting to see the partition of India actually depicted visually. So I would definitely love to see more if there are any movies or videos. That would be
I
very
can
interesting.
suggest Garam Hawa as one, which I remember as something which really made an impact.
Yes,
Okay.
certainly.
Garam Hawa.
In fact, if all of you have any movie suggestions for Isha, please put them in the chat box. And
Yes,
we
that
can
And
send it to
Kushwant
her.
Singh's book also, I think, Train to
came to
Pakistan.
Pakistan. Yes.
Yeah,
Did
that book.
you get a chance to read Train to Pakistan?
Yes, the parts of it I don't remember it quite well, but I remember it was quite a grotesque
Yes.
telling, but very brutally honest.
Yes, very, very. And yes, you're right, grotesque, definitely. I mean, that is how it was. The Madhu is asking, was your Nani born before independence?
No, an interesting fact would be that Bhabi Padma Bajaj, she was not, my Nani was her daughter-in-law.
Oh,
And Nani, I don't think she was born before independence. She was born after independence. But Bhabi was such a great storyteller that my mom describes it as painting a story through her words. She would paint a nice picture. And to have that kind of an impact, to be able to remember, for the listeners to be able to remember so many details years after she said it. Uh, no, my Nani was not born before independence, but these stories, I can't imagine anyone telling them better.
right. So it was told to her probably so vividly by Padma Bajaj that it
Yes,
sort of, that's how she retold them to you. That's really
yes,
fantastic. And that is really, you've actually captured such a fascinating oral history, right? So that is
yes.
really amazing. Vijay has asked the culture of that time and your generation's culture and environment. I'm guessing, Vijay, you're saying that, there's such a difference. Did it help you to develop your strong personality?
Strong personality. Well, I'm not. My mom would like to rephrase it as stubborn. I am very stubborn, and I believe I've inherited that from my mom and definitely my great grandmother, because Padma Bajaj was stubborn and she was willful. Um, but uh, I think the culture that I'm reading about and I hear about then is influencing what I think now. In fact, it I after writing this book, my outlook on many day-to-day things is a confluence of both what I've heard about and what I currently live and the world I currently live in. I would not say I have a strong personality, maybe very, very stubborn, but thank you.
So I think also the fact that, how it's has it created a difference in your thinking, which you mentioned. That
Yes, yeah, it has.
definitely. So how do you feel about being Sindhi now after, all the research and this understanding of your own history, your family's history? What does it mean to you now?
Um, I remember this one instance from fourth grade where I told one of my friends that I am half Sindhi, half Gujarati. And she told me, are you sure you don't mean Hindi? And that's when I started questioning why do people not question Gujaratis? Why do they question Sindhis? Are we being forgotten in that way? So, of course, I jumped for joy when I saw Sindhi listed in my social studies textbook that very year in one of the scheduled languages in the constitution. It was something of a I told you so. But for me to really question it in the first place, it was showing that the Sindhi culture was slowly disappearing. And I feel proud to be a Sindhi right now because Sindhis, they have been through a lot with the partition. And after losing their homeland and having to migrate to so many different places in the world, uh, Padma Bajaj Bhabi's story is just a testament to the will to survive. Uh, they, their acumen, their survival instincts, and them being so shrewd, it is it definitely makes me feel proud to come from that family, to be a part of that culture.
That's a brilliant answer, Isha. And, it really comes through your poise, the research you put in, your understanding, it all comes through wonderfully. Here's a question that I have been wanting to ask you. This is from Nina Bajaj. How is being 15, just 15, and living in different areas, you were able to relate with Bhavi to describe her emotions so beautifully? You're so young, you live in a completely different, life. You live a completely different life. So yeah, how have you done that?
Um, I think it wasn't too much of an exertion of my own imagination. Bhavi was just a force. She was such a strong personality, a strong character. She was the sort of woman you would meet and you would never forget because she left that impression on you. So I think it was not that difficult for me to relate to Bhavi because she was just such a strong personality. She made it so easy to relate with her with the stories she left behind for us. And I think I would have not been able to do so well about relating with Bhavi's own story if it wasn't for my mom just telling me those small little stories, describing her character, giving the flaws and the most beautiful parts, making the character human for me to actually put it down to paper.
That's wonderful. So, what was your process like when you were writing? It, of course, started with a school project, but what point, when you decided to do it, write it as a book, and you were doing all that research? So, were you writing, one chapter first, seeing what was the whole thing like?
My writing process was erratic. It was not organized at all.
You're a true
Uh,
author.
I started I started writing this not, and I didn't want to make it a book, or I didn't even have that idea when I first started writing it. It was supposed to be a gift for my mom because she misses my great grandmother a lot. She misses Bhabi a lot. And it was supposed to be just a small gift, a small keepsake, something to remember Bhabi by. Then it slowly developed into something more. But I started with pencil and paper. I wrote the prologue, in fact, on paper, and then I started shifting it to my computer, where my process was very erratic. I would pop up, and one weekend I'd finish 5 chapters, and then there would be nothing for nearly 2 weeks, 3 weeks, because I don't know how to move on from that or just school problems. And more often than not, I would sit late at night and I would just stare at the cursor and I would think, why am I not being able to progress further from here? And then came my favorite part of the process, which was all the stories. My nanny telling me these stories and my mom telling me more stories about how she remembered Bhavi. And then off I would go. I would write a whole new chapter. But by the end of draft one, I knew I was not at all happy. My book was just 11 chapters, and the chapters were huge and they didn't make sense. So then I went through multiple drafts and multiple times I rewrote the book. And I'm quite proud of what I've put forward today.
That's great. And congratulations. You, as an author, need to be proud of your work. So,
Thank
congratulations on that. A fun thing which Chitra also asked you in the beginning, have your friends read the book, and what have been, the reviews? What were the initial reviews like? First, tell us, have all your friends read the book?
Yes, my friends have also been really, really supportive throughout my book. One of my closest friends, she managed to read a few of the drafts, and then she took, when the books just came out, she got a book of mine and she read it and she left a huge review that really touched me. And then there were the more entertaining reviews. Like one of my friends, she would give me a daily update on how much she would finish of the book. And she would ask me why I did that to that character. It was so mean. It was a very entertaining live commentary. And it was also so satisfying to see in the middle of a free period when she had nothing to do, she would have that book in her bag and she would continue reading the chapters. It was my friends are definitely a huge, huge support in my book.
Yeah, and certainly entertaining. The
Very,
so you said it's historical fiction, right? So
yes.
did you, did you have to think a lot? I mean, did you alter certain characters? Are there people here in this conversation today who have joined, who may be a little bit of a part in you, who may have a bit of a part in your book?
Yes, in fact, a huge part. I think Savitri Didi is here, and she is one of Padma Bajaj's children. She
Okay,
is one of the younger children.
maybe
And
could we spotlight her
yes,
along with you? And would she
yes.
like, so what did you think of the book? How was it reading this book on your mother?
It is an amazing experience. I just can't describe in words, as she has written so many things about my mother. I feel that she is alive and narrating her own things herself. Really, it's a very proud moment, a very proud thing Isha has given us. And my mummy was what she has described in her book, no? She was exactly like that only. Very motivating, very encouraging.
That's really brilliant. Isha, how did,
But
how is Savitri a, she's obviously a character in the book, and what kind of insights did you get from her?
So Savitri Didi is actually a history teacher. So, in fact, it means so much actually having this review from her that if she thinks I have done justice to the book, then there is no bigger compliment for me. And of course, when it comes to how the family dynamics were and remembering a little bit of what happened after they migrated to India, I did get quite a few details from many, many relatives, and Savitri Didi had also told me one story.
Okay, and did you have to alter any part of hers when you were writing, when you were putting in the fiction bits, or was it all true?
From a character perspective, since Savitri Didi was a child in the book, I imagined her as a sort of playful character, who clings to her elder siblings and she's inherited many things from her mother, like that voracious reader, a will to learn. And I think all of Bhabhi's children are just a testament to how you can pick up life after um, going through such a horrible event. All of them went into different paths, but all of them became really successful in life.
That's superb to know, and which is true. So many people went through partition and built their lives very successfully. Thank you for joining us, Savitri. Thank you for coming on the spotlight. And
thank you.
thank you so much. And
Thank you.
we would, I think Isha's told us a lot about the book. In fact, there's a comment from Madhu. My parents and family came to India after partition, and she would definitely read your book. Yes, a lot of people would identify with the theme, right? Would
A
anyone
very
like?
interesting comment that came was that Savitri Didi actually did, in a way, fulfill Bhavi's dream of becoming a teacher.
Yes, actually, that's actually
Yes.
true, right? And in
Yeah.
a, Isha was thinking there are a lot of young people. You are like how many generations? Like three generations removed from partition, right? And many younger people are writing more and more about partition now, and those years, if not just partition, those early years. You think it's, you think it's easier? This may be a little complicated question, but if I mean, you can think about it. If was it, you think it's easier for someone in this generation to write about it? It might have been too close of a pain for someone, say, from Bhabhi's generation. You think it would have been easier for you than it would have been for, say, if she were to write her history?
Actually, I think if Bhabhi had written the story down, everybody would have been so hooked to the story, just like when she was alive. If she had written that story down, I'm pretty sure it would have been a bestseller in no time, because she had that way of telling stories. And even if the story was painful, I think she knew it was a very important one. And that's how she has left so many of the stories with so many relatives of my family. I don't think the story would have been too difficult. It was her story. And I think it was this is her story. And I think one of my biggest fears in the book was whether or not I would be able to do justice to Bhavi's story. So in a way, I wish I had talked to her and I met her, and she was the one to tell me the story.
Of course, but then you have brought her voice forward, which is such a wonderful achievement. Yes, Mr. Telreja, you can go ahead. I see you've raised your hand.
Hello,
Yes, who's that?
can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you. Yes.
I would like to add one more thing, that the film on partition was Abana.
Okay.
Abana was the film which was based on partition, and very
Okay.
close the
Mm-hmm.
incidents they have shown in that, how we came. And actually Bhabhi used to say the same, whatever they are showing, we have come like that only.
Okay. So this
From
is
Pakistan.
ABANA, Abana?
Abana picture long back, now
Acha.
must be 50 years back,
Okay.
that Abana picture, in that they have shown the real picture of the partition.
Okay. Okay. That's great to know. We'll also
And
try to find out.
it was Sindhi film. It was Sindhi film.
Ah, okay. Okay. So
Okay.
that
It
is
was
great to know.
that's why many may not be knowing, but it was Sindhi film.
That's really good to know. There are so many things, whether it's regional cinema or,
It was regional, and I think it was must be made in Pakistan's this thing, but I don't know. But Abana picture was full of all the events of partition.
okay. You think that Sindhi experience, Savitri, I'm asking you also, you think
Yes.
the Sindhi experience has been depicted well throughout literature, throughout history so far? Is it because we hear more of, the Punjab, of course, everyone migrated that time. So do you think it's been, portrayed well so far?
Sindhis, no, I'm not satisfied with that. But basically, we were so small that time, so we don't know much about that. Whatever stories we hear from our parents, Bhabhi and my father, they used to give all these events and all, how they were suffering there in Pakistan, and how the Sindhi culture and all, because we have not experienced that all.
Right.
We are brought up in Maharashtra only, so we were knowing this only. But after partition, how we suffered like untouchable. In Maharashtra, when we settled, means Bhabhi with 5 children, when we came to Maharashtra, that is Pulgaon, we were treated as untouchable.
Okay.
We were not allowed to take water from the public taps.
My God. Mm-hmm.
Those feelings, Bhabhi used to say, how we have come out of that after a long time. Then when they realized that Sindhis are not that, they used to call us Sharanarthis.
Okay. Hmm.
And because of our culture, our dresses, first they were treating us that we are Muslims,
Okay.
that salwar kurta and all now.
Hmm.
So, but after a long struggle, long time, they recognize that no, they are not untouchable, they are not Muslims, they are Sindhis. And after that, when we established as a businessman, so they understood that they are the different people, they are Sindhis and with a great culture.
Then the respect came. So great. Thank you
Yes,
for that insight. Thank you so much. I can
thank you.
see both.
Reshmi, am I audible?
Yes. Is that
Yeah.
Yogesh?
Okay. Yes.
Yes. Please go
So
ahead.
thank you, Reshmi. And I think there's just a couple of things to say. One, definitely congratulations to Isha. She is my current favorite author until she writes her next book. Um, and I think this book, a couple of things I can say about this book. Number one is there are many good authors that India is producing nowadays, but one thing is in their rush or in their desire to attain fame and fortune. Um, I find that they tend to overspice their books, add sensationalism, add such graphic descriptions of events that are not necessarily good for the reader, uh, and depends how the reader might take it. This is one book that is so refreshingly written, simple English. You don't need to refer a dictionary. No unnecessary description of the violence that may have happened, because you can literally run wild. In the realm of fiction, you can write anything that you want, but none of that spice. It's so easy to read, doesn't leave you with any hangovers of any kind. You just breeze through, and yet it's like a mist of fine water, sprayed on your face. You feel so nice. Secondly, this book is a result of a child listening to their parents and their grandparents. There is a certain amount of stillness in one's personality that is required. Otherwise, you can't just write any book, much less this book. You just can't write a book. So I'm happy to see that stillness in Isha. It's always been there since her childhood. And it just goes to show not everybody needs to write a book in life, but it just goes to show that just by listening to one's elders, one's parents, one's grandparents, there is so much to learn. You are not going to live their life, you are not going to go through those experiences, so you don't have to necessarily learn from that perspective. But there are a lot of life's lessons, a lot of attributes of their personalities that you can imbibe just by listening to them. So
Absolutely.
please listen. And I think these qualities are rare. So please preserve them for those who don't have, inculcate them, please. So that's all I would have like to say.
Thank you, Yogesh. That's a really glowing review. And I guess this is a close to heart review also. So thank you, Yogesh. Vatsala had raised her hand. Vatsala, if you'd want to unmute and say something.
Yeah. Hi, Isha.
Hello, good evening.
Yeah, I'm super impressed by the fact that you're just 15 years old and you have brought out a novel. This is a debut novel, I think, because I would miss the first quarter of the show. Is this your debut novel? Book?
Yes,
Oh,
it is
very nice.
two books before this, but this is my debut novel.
Oh, you've written 2 books before this.
Yes.
Oh my God, that's fantastic. So you sound and look like a very mature person, okay? So in your opinion, can I just ask you one question? Do
Sure.
you think partition was a good thing or a bad thing? From a 15-year-old girl, what do you say about it? Just in one line.
I
Was
think
it a good thing or a bad thing? No, forget about the, whatever the cruelty, the deaths, the horror associated with it. But otherwise, like maybe strategically or politically, was it a good thing or a bad thing? Just one line. I don't intend to make you nervous, okay? You look very
no,
smart. So I'm sure you're not nervous.
I think the partition was an evil necessity that was not executed well.
Okay, evil necessity not executed well. My God, beautifully answered, yeah. In a nutshell, you sound like a, 35-year-old who's been writing for the last 20 years.
Absolutely
My
great,
mom
very
Yeah.
smart answer.
Yeah. Yeah,
comment.
evil necessity, yeah, could have been executed well. Yes, okay. One bad thing about the partition. One bad thing, just one bad thing.
The division of the land, maybe. It it was done. The Radcliffe line was drawn in a way that it did not make sense, first of all, and it was drawn up by a man who had never set foot inside India prior to that event. He was a lawyer. Radcliffe was a lawyer who was brought in specifically for this purpose. And I don't think the way India was divided into India and Pakistan was done well. And it has left that hatred that is still prevalent in both countries
It's
that
very
used.
sad. Absolutely. Yes, it's absolutely sad. So I haven't read any book on partition as yet, but I've read The Anarchy by Mr. Dalrymple.
Yes,
And
it's a
yeah, have you read it? Have you read that?
brilliant
Oh
book.
my God. So I met Mr. Dalrymple at the Bangalore Lit Fest, and I told him, after having read your book, I feel like throttling the British. So he joked. He said, "Don't blame the British, ma'am. It was the East India Company," and he joked about it. Yes, that book, it gives a little glimpse into the partition, of course, towards the end, but yeah, it's really horrific reading about it. Yeah. And what are your favorite genres otherwise to read?
I like reading a variety of books, I would say, but over the last quite a few years, I think I've maintained my love in history, historical fiction, classics. I love these genres of books, but otherwise, I do enjoy some odd or contemporary books that don't really fit in with many genres.
Tell us one that
Very nice, very nice.
liked.
And what do you think? We like who belong to the, maybe we were all born in the 60s, 70s, 50s. We like reading a paper-bound book or a hard-bound book. What do you think of the new, whatever, digital, this one?
Kindle.
I think
Yes,
Kindles
on
are
smart
really.
devices, reading on the smart devices. What do you think about it?
I think Kindles are really convenient, but I can't. As a personal choice, I don't like substituting my books, the actual paper and the feel of a book with a Kindle. I don't enjoy it as
Absolutely, yes, yes.
much.
It's not like the feel of holding a book, the yellowed pages and the peculiar
Yes,
smell of the books, isn't it?
yes.
Yes, reading that, and that replaced by Kindle, and reading on the smartphones, on the computers. Yes, yeah, maybe the current generation will relate to that. But we love to, we are inside of, we are old school, perhaps. Yes. Yeah. Anyway, it was nice talking to you. All the best to you, Isha.
Thank you.
I'll try to get a copy of your book, not Kindle. Huh? I'll try to buy a book. Is it
We
available on
can put
Amazon?
we can put
Yes.
the link here for everybody while I can see
Okay.
two more people raising their hands while that
Yeah.
is happening. So
Okay.
is that your dad, Isha? Sawmill?
Yes, that's
Okay.
my
So, Isha's dad says have caught her smelling books many times. That's the sign of a true book lover. That's amazing. So, in
well,
fact, I was asking you what is, you talked about contemporary history. What are you currently reading, and what is an absolute favorite, even though you may have many?
so there are these odd books that I will suddenly pick up, and I would do some background research on them because I've just passed them in a bookstore. And and one of my absolute favorites that I share with my mom is The Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother, written by Amy Chua. I think my mom just cheered in the background. It's it's sort of a very nice story. It's clash of the cultures, Western versus Asian, and of course, told beautifully throughout the book. And one of my favorite authors right now is Frederick Backman. He has written many books, and his stories, while you could say, is not sensational and doesn't have the kind of excitement, but his writing style just keeps you hooked to the very end. So those are a few books I would definitely keep reading.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And Vishwanath had raised his hand. So Vishwanath, would you like to unmute and ask?
I thank you, Isha. All the best. That was a wonderful presentation you did on your book.
Thank you so
And
much.
Rashmi, I agree with what she said. You know, she has done a lot of homework on this. Because when I was there in that the Chandigarh Museum at Amritsar Museum,
Partition Museum, yes.
Yeah.
Partition Museum, till the 17th, they didn't know where the line of partition was declared.
Yes.
You know, nobody knew whether we were in India or whether we were in Pakistan or not.
Yeah.
And second part was as what her aunt was telling is why people wanted to go away from them, because the word refugee was associated with Thagi, who were associated with the one who had, they were compromised on their lots of things. It was I spent about 3 days in that museum, and I was just recounting all the things what Isha was telling. It was wonderful that you have done so much of homework on your book. Congratulations.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you, Vishwanath. We'll take one last question. I think Neena, you've raised your hand. Would you like to say something?
If I may add about refugee, I remember having a conversation where we talked about how refugee is or refugee culture is often misunderstood, because I think refugees are just a testament of strength, that despite coming so far away from where you are from, leaving behind what is familiar to make your place in a new society, in a new culture, a new setting, it is a very brave thing to do. And the refugees from all around the world, no matter where they are from, all of them share that same will to survive, and not just survive, but thrive. I think that is the most important.
That's very true, Risha, and very, very well said. It's really true. So if we don't have any further questions or comments, we have put the link to Isha's book in the chat box. So if you click on the link, it will open her book on Amazon. So do check it out. And thank you, Isha. It was a really enlightening talk and very interesting presentation from you. And thank you, everyone who joined us and listened in today. And we wish you a lot of success, and we hope your book gets well known and you get invited to lit fests and the works. So and that's Isha's mom. Hi, thank you for encouraging her to write this. This is such an intergenerational book, actually. Her great grandmother, stories from you, stories from her nanny. It's actually an intergen project. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Isha, for joining in. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.